very warm welcome, everybody who is online with us today for this BioYUFE webinar on AI in education and research. I'm hoping that you can see my PowerPoint slide there on your screen already. And I should give a little bit of information on what BioYUFE is. YUFE, as is labeled in the bottom right here, is the Young Universities for the Future of Europe initiative. It's an alliance of various universities across Europe, and BioYUFE is a subsection of that. It's a grassroots development as part of the YUFE alliance, where people from life science backgrounds, including biology, of course, come together and want to push sort of the education side in the life sciences for YUFE. So that's what Ute and I are part of. I'm trying to move on to the next slide. Here we go. Okay. So Ute is with us today. She's at the University of Bremen. I am Michael Steinke. I'm at the University of Essex School of Life Sciences. And Ute and I, we are running these webinars this current year. And today we've got with us Aki Herma from Maastricht University in the Netherlands. And he will talk first about automated conversational assessment, or ACA. And then we've got Jennifer Hoyle-Cathell from here at the University of Essex, and she will present on machine learning for biological image analysis. So now this webinar, I should warn you, is recorded and will probably appear eventually on the YUFE YouTube channel. And of course, all throughout the webinar, we encourage you to ask either live questions or add your questions to the chat so that the presenters then can react to those when we have a few minutes left towards the end of the webinar. I should mention the following webinars that are coming over the next year in March, 28th of March. This is actually a webinar that is organized by Liliane Campos in France, and she runs a biocriticism seminar series, and she made this particular webinar on neglected biodiversity available to the BioYUFE webinar series. In April, then, we've got our colleagues from the Ukraine talking about military ecology. That should be quite interesting. It's sort of a new field of ecology that is opening up in recent years, sadly, due to military conflicts all over the world. And then in June, our last webinar in the series is focusing on green exercise and mental health. So I just wanted to give you a very brief sort of look at what I know about AI, very little. And I want you to meet Daisy, a so-called AI scam biter. Does that sound come through?
No, it's not coming through.
Oh, it's not coming. Okay, sorry. Let me just see where I can change that by trying to share that again. Just a share button. I forgot to do that earlier. Okay, let's try that again.
Even. Meet my friend, Daisy.
Hello, scammers. I'm your worst nightmare. I'm an AI created by O2 to waste phone scammers' time. So, W's then a dot.
3 times W and then dot.
I think your profession is bothering people, right?
I'm just trying to have a little chat.
It's nearly been an hour! For the love of...
Gosh, how time flies. It's showing me a picture of my cat, Fluff.
So I stopped that here just in the interest of time, but I find that quite interesting in a way that, AI obviously can be used for, these quite useful purposes. Of course, scamming people are trying to get to your details, and somebody like this may distract them from actually having access to you. Then recently there was a meeting in the UK, I think it was, and there were 2 Nobel Prizes this year that relate to AI, one in chemistry and one in physics. And Demis Hassabis, who leads Google DeepMind, he is referred to in this particular article here. He says AI is not a magic bullet. To make breakthrough, researchers must identify the right problems, collect the right data, build the right algorithms, and apply them in the right way. So there are a lot of rights in there that have to be achieved in order to actually, have a positive outcome, basically. So AI often can, reach decisions, but not explain them, making the system hard to trust. So people struggle with, although they have an output from AI, to really accept that and then move things forward. So that needs to be overcome. And there are problems like backlashes, inequalities in society, financial crises, catastrophic data breach, extraordinary energy demands that AI needs. And we are happy about AI designed vaccines. They save people, but AI designed bioweapons is another topic, I guess. And we've got to be very careful about how this development will continue to the future. So let me just stop the share here, and then we go straight over to Aki, I think. Aki, if you want to share any slides, I think that would be a good moment to then move into your presentation from here. Over to you, Aki.
Yes, it would be a good moment indeed. And I think you should be able to see now something coming up, right?
Yep, that's all good.
Okay, very good. Thanks, Michael, for the introduction. So these questions about kind of responsible AI and how to make these systems more efficient and fair and all that is kind of a research agenda of this department that I'm in. But today we are going to talk about kind of like a positive use cases of large language model technology, where we can actually benefit from that and do something good in that sense. So therefore, that attention is not in the concerns around the technology so much. So I'm Aki Härmä. I'm with the Department of Advanced Computing Sciences at Maastricht University. I'm like AI scientist. I have a long history working in industry also. I only recently returned back to academia and took a faculty position here. And I'm teaching really about these technologies, and we have driving one of the research lines that I'm developing is how we can use these technologies to enhance university education. And in this talk today, I give a couple of examples of works that we have done, some of the early activities there, and a bit of like overview of this whole area where we are in when we are applying these technologies. So this is not very long time. I actually combined two conference talks into this one, which is a bit of a squeeze, but I give at the end links to some demos and some papers that we have on this topic area already. But there are like plenty of ways how we can use this generative AI technology, like was shown in this nice video that we just saw in education. So we can use it to create materials, personalized study materials. We can use it in part of the assessment technology, like something that I'm going to show today, assisting students in learning, personalization, optimization of their learning path, and all these administrative functions that are around the educational system. And of course, the goal there would be that we would have, as teachers, more time to teach, more focus on students and interaction directly with students by leaving out some of the things that none of us actually like to do, but we have to do, like assessment or kind of a very practical administrative tasks. So there are plenty of applications, like I said. There's a very nice overview article actually about the use of generative AI in different use cases in education. I think they listed like 46 different applications in higher education alone, where you can use these technologies to somehow to help humans, not only to replace the teachers, so to speak. So my case first one is what we call automatic conversational assessment, ACA, which is something that we have been developing for a couple of years now, and trying to develop that into a kind of a proper project. It's still very much like an internal research activity at this moment. So the background is that exams, they are stressful for the students, and we know that they don't test so well the knowledge of the student on the topic area. Usually it only kind of can capture like the very simple things of remembering and understanding things. Very hard to make an exam which is actually testing how well you can apply knowledge. And the assessment of exams is also burdening for the teachers. So when I came here back to the academia, I was shocked by how these my colleagues here spent like their weekends, their holidays, like marking students' exams, and it is quite a burden. It's not something that we all want to do. And then there's alternative for exams, which is very good often in many teaching areas. Essays, you really can kind of go deep there. You can have a student writing like focusing on a particular thing and doing research on topic area. But we know that these are getting kind of unreliable, partly or largely because of this development in this assisting AI technology. We see a lot of essays coming back which are half written by ChatGPT. And therefore, essays are becoming kind of a not so good tool as they would be kind of on paper. So what we can do when the essays are gone and the exams are bad, so we can do something else. And there is very good traditional ways of evaluating the knowledge of a student after a course. And that's the oral examination. So the teacher spends time with the student, asks questions, have a conversation, challenges the student to kind of go beyond that and see where the limits actually are, and then base the assessment on this conversation. So in this way, you can go deep, but that doesn't scale. My latest course, I had 181 students. You cannot go with oral exam with all these students, of course. That is very clear. There we can go higher. We can go higher in this so-called Bloom's taxonomy of teaching level. So beyond understanding, remembering things, going towards creative use of your knowledge. And that is, of course, something that eventually we would like to go also into education. So we understand more deeply what is the level of knowledge the student have. So this is our concept. Automatic conversational assessment, which has the model is this oral exam, so that we have a chatbot that interviews the student based on the information that we give to the bot. And then based on that conversation, which contains follow-up questions, all these like conversational elements of a natural oral examination, it comes up with some sort of grading or recommendation for the student for future study. So that's the principle, and that's what we have been building and working on. So this is actually blurring this line between formative and summative assessment. Formative assessment is something that you do during the course just to provide feedback for the student, and summative assessment is the one that gives you the actual grade. And when we have this type of conversational system, it can be used throughout the course. It can be done in the beginning to check that what is the level of the student entering the course, in the middle, how things are going, where we need to pay more attention to, and the final assessment. So it can be kind of turned into some sort of a tutor or assistant for the student as well. So we have built a system based on a large language model technology, this very kind of traditional way of combining things. We have input to the system is content. It could be like a book, it could be a collection of articles, and then we have some sorts of rubrics. So this design is based on this concept of having content and rubric which describes what the student is supposed to know. And this is like a table of facts and information and kind of learning objectives. And these are basically given to the system, and then we have a conversation with the student. And based on the conversation results, we can make the grading of the student. So that's the basic scenario. We use this entire conversation as a basis for the grading of the student's knowledge of the topic area. So I don't have time to go to all the details, especially technical details here. So there is a paper that we wrote, and I have a link to that at the end of the presentation. So what we did after building this system is that we wanted to start testing that. We, of course, had some technical testing so that we see that things work, but we also wanted to test that with students. And we have several courses here in the department, and one of them is a multi-agent systems course, which had a perfect timing for our testing. We recruited a number of students for that course, and to do this automatic conversational assessment in parallel with the real exam. And that was done. So we had rubrics about particular narrow content area of that course, which was about the auction systems, which is part of this content. And we had a Telegram-based chatbot, text-based automatic conversational assessment, where the system was asking student questions, and the student was answering, and system was asking follow-up questions, and going through this whole topic area described, which is about auctions, different auction systems actually in this case. And then we went to the assessment. We had also exam next to that. We saw that what are the actual grades of the students. We also made a human assessment of that the conversation that was produced by the bot. And we saw that there's very high correlation with human in terms of the assessment based on the conversation. We didn't find very good correlation actually with the exam, because the exam content also a little bit different material and it didn't ask exactly the same questions. But we had some positive correlation there as well. We also saw that the humans are more positive than our bot in giving the average grade. Yeah, but that's kind of a balancing issue we can do. So in the future, we want to develop this towards not text-based, but speech-based conversation. So it's more natural, closer to this oral exam that I mentioned earlier. So and this is work in progress. Also, how we go beyond what we have now. This rubric-based testing still kind of tests only this bottom level of Bloom's star pyramid. So how we get to kind of more complex ways of evaluating the ability to understand the concepts in the training material and apply that to new use cases in a creative way. So we are trying to build kind of a knowledge on that, how we can make that steps up in the pyramid in that sense. So that was my first case. Second case is an assistant for the bachelor projects. So we have identified, we have a lot of students. Our student numbers have been increasing in the last recent years, and we have quite a lot of time that we need to spend just for kind of giving guidance to students, answering their questions about the practicalities in the courses. So this, let me just say an example. No, like student misses some final date because of illness or something like that, or there was some kind of something happening to the student which is really unique and personal, and how we then apply the rules and regulations around courses and educational kind of protocols here to give the right advice to the student what need to be done next. And this is what we wanted to focus on. We wanted to build like a conversational agent, which is not asking questions from the student, but answering students' questions. So it's a question answering system. And it's kind of a virtual assistant for the study path, study journey of the student, focusing on these rules and regulations in this case, not the content of the course, but how these kind of practical things are managed there around the course. So benefits, what we count are that it would be for the staff members. Of course, we get a lot of emails about all kinds of practicalities that you missed something and is it going to harm my grade or something like that. And of course, for the student also that they can get answers immediately. So this type of system is available 24/7. So if they have a concern, if they fell ill, they can right away get an answer that what this means for my studies, what I need to do extra in order to pass this phase, for example. So again, we built a system based on large language model technology, combining some kind of new components that we have there. In particular, we focus on kind of our, just to mention one thing, our specialty is this so-called self-reflection system, which is after generating the answer to the student's question, checking that whether it contains hallucinations or is it actually answering the question or not. And we built quite some technology for this validation phase, that we are not kind of giving incorrect answers back to the student. And that iteration, and eventually the quality was perceived very nice. So we have a technical testing of a bunch of like a predefined questions that we want to check, and it gives mostly correct answers. Also, we tested this with different scenarios, and we see that in most of the scenarios, which could be like, for example, I missed a class and what I need to do next or something like that. We get improvement when you have an assistant compared to when you have just a student. So this was done with the 64 students who tested that system in a simulated scenarios. These 8 different scenarios of typical assistance situations that they have. There were some cases where it wasn't so exactly correct in this first prototype that it worked on, but mostly the system gave the right answers in this all these scenarios that we were simulated in this case. We also wanted to get the subjective feedback from the students in terms of the usability and helpfulness of this system, and we got very positive results in that as well. So on the Likert scale, where 5 means that very useful or useful, it is valuableness, response time, helpfulness, so forth, was perceived well. Response time, as you see, it is available 24/7, but this was still a prototype system which took some tens of seconds sometimes to give you the perfect answer. So this is certainly something, an attention point still in the future. But it is better if you get a response in 20 seconds versus that you get the response in an email in 2 weeks. So therefore, this was certainly kind of perceived much better than having a human answering these boring questions over and over again. So this also differs from just the frequently asked questions list, because these are typically more complex questions that you don't exactly know how to interpret the results. Therefore, this was also seen valuable over a kind of conventional list of questions. So we built a kind of nice web interface for that as well. There is a demonstrator that you can play with, yeah, so that's basically it. I think I'm also at the end of the time box now. So here are some links to the our demonstrator, automatic conversational assessment demonstrator, this Telegram demonstrator. We have also a paper which is very soon online, which is showing the technical design of this automatic conversational assessment system and the results that we got from this testing. Secondly, the student assistant demo is in this link, and we also have a publication about this assistant system and the design of that. But this concludes my presentation. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you very much, Aki. Much appreciated. It was a lovely start to the webinar, actually. I've got quite a few interesting questions here written down in front of me, but I think we leave the main questioning towards later, unless there is something that somebody would like to clarify just now, whether there's any demand. There's nothing coming up in the chat yet. As I said earlier, feel free, particularly at the end, to open up your microphone and ask questions directly, or write your questions into the chat, or suggestions, any comments that you have, really, into the chat, and then we are trying to be reactive to that. But if there's nothing coming up, and I don't think there is anything coming up, I think then, Jen, it's straight over to you. Thanks again, Aki, and we will come back to that in a few minutes then, right? So we go straight over to Jen.
Okay, very good.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you. I really enjoyed that. I look forward to having an opportunity. We can discuss that more. Some exciting things there, new systems that I wasn't aware of and look really exciting to me. Okay, I'll just move my Zoom controls so that they're not in the way. Let's move them there. Okay, can you see now a slide in presentation view?
Yep, that's all good, Jen.
Fantastic. Okay, so hopefully this should be, I think, a good complement to Aki's talk, as we're going to look at some different areas. So we're going to think about machine learning for some research applications in the life sciences, particularly considering image analysis. So I'm going to talk a little bit generally and then show a few things that we've been working on in my research group. Okay, so let's just get that moving. Okay, so I wanted to zoom kind of out for a second and think about what machine learning is. And I found it interesting that listening to commentators, experts in this area, people who've been in, say, computer science for a long time, people who are more in my perspective, where they've been in a different field like life sciences, and then kind of recently become aware of these technologies. You know, what do they think that machine learning is? And I've noticed that there are quite diverse views and perspectives on this. And it's a large area in which we're kind of drawing links between things, and people have drawn those links in different ways. So one simple practical view would be that machine learning is a type of artificial intelligence, and it's where a computer program learns something from, say, what we might call some data, from some input information that isn't in its input code. So we're learning something from that data there. There's another view which is more historical. So we can see that's kind of shown in this image here from the company NVIDIA, with taking artificial intelligence back to the 1950s, thinking about early computing, robots, things like that. And then we see machine learning kind of developing as a subfield within there. And then even more recently, we have new areas like deep learning. So we have things like artificial neural networks of very large scale with increased processing power. And I think this is the area which has been of particular interest recently due to the gains that we get from this kind of computational power and the new quite amazing abilities some of these networks have. Just quickly note also that I have heard what I've kind of called a futurist view, which kind of flips this around a bit and is saying that machine learning is a way of interacting with the world for computers that will enable a new level of artificial intelligence. So we might then see things like a general artificial intelligence emerging. Okay. So as a biologist or working in life sciences fields, I'm interested in machine learning because it can allow us to move quite directly from large data sets. These might be kind of databases of things that we've measured. They might be images we've taken at all kinds of levels, maybe photographic, maybe some other imaging technique, or there might be other things like audio signals, which can then actually quite easily be converted into an image format. There's various sort of mappings between different formats. We can then use machine learning to build a kind of model which is quantitative, which makes some kind of measurement, which we can hopefully then understand, and we can learn something quite directly from that data that we didn't know. And I think this is extremely exciting for biology because of the complexity of the data that we might be dealing with, the complexity of life essentially. And so these highly capable systems may allow us to learn much more about that. Okay, so there are some different areas of machine learning. So what's been called traditional machine learning on this slide would involve manual feature extraction, as it's kind of called in computer science. So this would mean people measuring things, but we could then use machine learning techniques to analyze those measurements, say to classify things into categories that we were interested in. Now, this is an area I actually see a lot of biologists now getting interested in this, which is maybe a very slightly older technique than deep learning, for example, but still I think of increasing interest. This next technique, which we can use deep learning as an example of, would be a fully automated process. So we might move directly from data, for example, images, and then we might do that measurement and that classification all in one automated series of steps. So this essentially could allow us to skip that manual measurement phase, and this potentially offers a lot of advantages in terms of what we can do. Okay, one of the techniques we're using to analyze images is the use of convolutional neural networks, or CNNs, ConVNets, and these are able to, for example, take image data as an input and to learn to recognize important features, small areas, say, of images which have commonalities with others and are informative in some way about something we want to know, say, for example, classifying those images into types. And there are a few kind of basic features of this which are very advantageous in biology compared to the kind of methods we had before. Just in terms of things like being able to match features which are present in different places in an image. They don't have to be exactly the same, but we can recognize this kind of fuzzy similarity, things that are quite like each other. And that can be very useful in biology, where we have individual variability, say, which might be important as well as general features to recognize. Okay, So that might allow us to deal with technical issues that might come up in images like translation, scaling, rotation, different weights. These are all things that we can overcome to recognize common features. Okay, so where we've been taking this, we have been using methods which you can call methods of embedding. So we are taking data, and this data might be different kind of things. I've shown two examples here, one with lots of images, photographs of butterflies, and another example from our research where we've been embedding data points that represent species that occurred in time. So we can use different kinds of data here, and then we can embed them, which means we can put them into spaces. These are kind of multi-dimensional spaces that represent something important to us that we would like to be able to see, to measure, to learn about. So in the case of the butterflies, for example, we are using a convolutional neural network on the images to measure how similar they are to each other. So we can get an idea of how visually similar different butterflies are, and we can measure that in this space. So we can measure the distance between them, and we can take, say, averages. So we can get things like an idea of how similar different species or subspecies of butterfly are to each other. This is very exciting as there are a whole range of different kind of uses for this basic idea of being able to measure the similarity between things that are very complex. So one of the things we looked at here was we were looking at the extent of evolution in mimicry. So we're looking at how has the biodiversity of this group evolved? How much of different parts of this radiation evolved relative to each other? Okay, so I've just put down a table here in which I've kind of thought about some of the benefits that we can potentially get from machine learning in biology. And some of them are about labor savings. This is something that came up in Aki's talk as well, where we can use labor savings to kind of really scale up what we can do. So this doesn't mean just that, might make our lives more pleasant, but even that we can do things that were not possible before because they were outside the limitations of the kind of time that people have available. And there are some things that I'm even more excited about, which are that we can potentially use machine learning to not just replicate things that people could do, but do them faster, do them at kind of larger scales, but to do things that people couldn't do before, to kind of use machine learning alongside our abilities and our collective knowledge to do new things and find new things out. Okay, right, so of course, we might want to think about some of the difficulties and the potential risks associated with doing this, as well as getting very excited. So I've put on here just a few headlines, examples of real headlines where these are sort of embarrassing cases of AI failure that got into the newspapers. So a few examples: healthcare algorithm failed to flag Black patients. Amazon AI-enabled recruitment tool only recommended men, and dataset trained Microsoft chatbot to spew racist tweets. Oh dear. So these were all very unfortunate. And there are quite a lot of things, obviously, that can go wrong, and we can't know in advance what will go wrong, but there are some common features that we can look out for. So one of them seems to be that there are biases in the dataset, that the dataset contained information that wasn't expected or lacked information that we would have wanted to be there, and that the people who trained this algorithm were unaware of that. So in biology, we can kind of bear that in mind, and we might have to think about what data is and isn't in our data sets. So here I've put some examples of lovely, fluffy cats and dogs. So I'm thinking here about a very classic example task of, can you classify images based on whether they are a cat or a dog? For a human, this is very easy. It's a task you can use to kind of train and test your model, see if how your model's doing. And a human, we're going to look at these animals, we're going to kind of use our life experience of what they're like, and we're going to think about that. But a computer, of course, isn't necessarily going to do this in the same way as a human. So an algorithm is likely, unless it's explicitly prevented from doing so, it's likely to use all available information. And you might notice that there are other things in these images which are in common between all the dogs and all the cats and different across them, which have nothing to do with the biological species or the nature of their biological identity. So I'm happy if you can spot how an algorithm might make an easy and quick system for identifying those without having to know anything about cats or dogs themselves. Okay, I'll leave that. Also, you might have seen the answer there. I'll kind of skip over that quickly. Maybe we can come back to it in the chat. So I'd like to see if people had ideas. They might have come up with some different things other than things I thought of as well. Okay, so I've got some details here about aspects of the data set that we used and things we found out. And I'll keep these up and I'll show these briefly, but I'll try to just give a few pointers to things here because I don't want to use up too much more time here, and I want to have time for us to interact. So if anyone would like to hear more about any of these points, please ask and we can come back to those at the end. So some more things to think about are data quantity and quality, how much data is feasible for us to collect, say, within our own scientific fields compared to the data sets that the technologies might have been developed on in computer science, which can, for example, be very large. Okay, how are we able to screen our data sets? Can we use manual screening? How might this scale? Okay, and what methods are we going to use to collect our data? Should these be aiming to make our data more uniform or more variable, perhaps? Okay. Okay, I'll very briefly describe one of the algorithms we've used in this mimicry study, which was published in 2019. So this was one of the first studies that I did using machine learning. And we used a technique which is called triplet training. So here we have an algorithm which is, it's quite simple, but it allows us to do, I think, some quite exciting things. So the basic way in which this works is that the algorithm is trained on triplets of images. So we sample from our data set, groups of 3. And we always do this where we have 2 that are the same. So they're drawn from the same class. So they might be, for example, the same species. And we have 1 that is different. And we then ask the algorithm to place the 2 things that are the same close together relative to the thing which is different, which it can put further away. And all the algorithm does is do this many, many times, repeatedly sampling from a large data set and moving things around until what we end up with is an internally consistent spatial embedding of all the images in our data set so that they optimally are spaced so that their similarity between things that are the same is optimized relative to things that are different. Okay. Right, okay, so one of the things we then want to think about is even though this algorithm is simple, it's easy to describe, it happens on a large scale, these things are repeated many times, and then we can end up then with something like a black box where we can't quite interrogate exactly what happened just because of the scale of the number of operations that were applied. But there are techniques that can be potentially used to kind of interrogate and unpick what's going on inside these machine learning algorithms. Okay, one of the things we've been doing is trying to look for ground truth to validate our method, and we have been using genetic information. So we've been looking at how similar things are in terms of their genetics and different parts of their genome, and we've been comparing that with the similarity that we measure using machine learning, and this allows us to contrast those signals and to some extent validate our machine learning method, and maybe also to learn things about, you know, the genetic data and the joint history of these species as a whole in terms of genes and their phenotype, what they're like. Okay, so I'll just briefly point to some things where I'm very excited because we've been able to use these methods that allow us to visualize and measure similarity to learn things that we didn't know and to validate hypotheses that have been in our field for a long time. So I've got an example here, which is about convergence in mimicry, how things have come to look similar to each other. So what we did in this study was we were able to measure the extent to which similarity had changed in evolutionary comparative analyses. And we were able to do tests of Muller's model of Mullerian mimicry, which is the very first mathematical model in evolutionary biology. And so I was very excited to be able to do a quantitative test of this long outstanding hypothesis in a new way. We were able to, I believe we've got supportive evidence that helps validate the insights that Muller made in the late 1800s. Okay, so this is just one example of where I think we can use machine learning to test hypotheses in a new way and to generate, with these kinds of visualizations, our own new hypotheses that we can then go on to explore. So thank you very much, and I will leave it there to allow time for some discussion.
Right. Thanks very much, Jennifer. Much appreciated. Two fantastic presentations, actually. Very different and yet very similar in a way as well. I find that striking, that you use, in a way, very similar approaches to tackle these very diverse, different questions, really. So now is really the time point for the audience, anybody who's listening to us online, to react to those talks in one way or another. You should feel free to raise your hand, and there's one raised hand already I can see. So we come to you in a moment. You can put something in the chat. You can open your microphone, as I said, raise your hand, and then we just hear what you have to say and what you would like to get answered possibly. So in the first instance, over to Iona, over to you. If you want to open your microphone, you've done it already, just fire away and ask a question or make a comment.
Okay, well, thank you very much for this presentation. First, a short word, because I have not been participating to BioYUFE as far. I am Johanna Galleron. I'm from Sorbonne Nouvelle, and I'm in charge of curricula here. I was very interested by both presentations, even if I'm not in charge of research. Just to make a short comment to Jennifer, I've just finished yesterday a conference organized. We are rather in literary studies, and we are precisely working. Actually, we have done some machine learning in literature, and it's not easy because of the quality of the data, but we are trying to move towards the more familiar conversational agent, generative AI, for using with literary studies. But I think we have a lot of things in common. My questions are rather for Aki. The first one is rather to say first that we have experimented with the type of assistant to students you have put into place. Ours is not AI based. It is based much more basically. It's a system of rules saying, well, whether the students comes from this department, is this a question related to inscriptions, to I've missed an exam or things like that, and send this there. So we are looking very much to your experiment, and we will be very happy to maybe replicate it in our institution, because of course the system has its limits. However, one of the things we have seen, which almost led to well, we had some difficulties with. First is that to forbid people to answer emails, because most of our secretarial people had already they had hundreds of emails, but they cannot stop themselves. They answer emails. And students, to be on the safe side, will ask the question via the tool, and will also send the email so that to be sure that someone receives it and answer it. And this makes, at least at the beginning, it doubles the workload. So yeah. I think there is something to be said there. I was also very interested by what you were saying about the assistant for grading the students, but I was wondering, didn't you have in your university any opposition to this kind of grading? Because I know that we had some talking here in Sorbonne Nouvelle, and the students were, how would I say it, well, we are France, and France, it's always revolting, let's say it like that. But students were very up against it, saying, oh, this is unacceptable, a machine grading us.
Thanks a lot for the good question. So yeah, so there was a question about both parts. Let me start from the second one, because that's of course a challenging. So we of course cannot make official assessment of the students based on this system, and therefore we did that in parallel for volunteering students, just to see how it works. Eventually, if it would be getting accepted for actual summative assessment, we should have some sort of proper validation and approval of the board of examiners, all that and all that procedure. So we are a bit far away from that still, that we would be officially able to use that system. The reliability must be at a higher level and testing at a higher level. So this is an issue. Regarding the students' feedback, we actually got very positive feedback from the students. So it is less stressful, first of all. Also, the fact that you can do your kind of examination multiple times. You can take as many retakes as you like, because it's not a burden for the teachers anyway. And all these conversational logs are always stored, so that's got a basis for the assessment, and this can be, and in principle would be reviewed by the responsible teacher. So we can build this way of working around this, so that it's seen as an assisting tool for the grading of the students, not the agent that is doing the grading.
Yeah, I think that what you said, that maybe it can work as formative and not summative grading.
Correct.
And there is another venue where I would be quite interested in working with you. I wonder if this wouldn't be a tool for students with the TSA, with troubles, with kind of autistic troubles, to prepare them for actually speaking to a human person. If you can make it work with a vocal synthesizer, so that the illusion of interacting with a human being be closer, I think it would be a very good preparations, because many of them are just losing their words in front of a
That's right.
examiner.
That's true. And also like a non-native speakers. We have a lot of them here, and this technology is multilingual. Basically, you can have exam in your own language. So you can choose your language that you can, or multilingual examination, mixing your own language and the English words, for example. So that could be also doable. So this provides this type of options, but they of course need to be properly tested and validated. And we need to build this kind of rails around that it's not going to be kind of doing anything improper. Regarding the first question, these systems for question answering of this type of things have been around for a long time, and indeed they have been traditionally based on this type of keyword spotting and like so-called back of word models, which are just a rule-based, giving certain like a pre-written answer back to the student. And we saw that in many of these questions that we have collected over the years with our study advisors, often questions are kind of complicated. They are touching multiple rules at the same time. And it's not always like black and white what should be done there. Of course, our system also has a certain responsibility, but at least it can give back the kind of points in the rules and regulations that are applying this student's situation, so that it can narrow down the problem space for the student to understand what rules are applicable to my case. And then, of course, the teacher can eventually help if there's still kind of unclarity on how to interpret the responses from the assisting system. Regarding the testing, by the way, for that particular system, we have a GitHub. You can just download the code, and I'm sure our students group who works on this could also be happy to give assistance.
Yeah, I would just like to thank you very much. That's a very interesting discussion already. I would just like to briefly follow up before we go to Matthew, who's got his hand up. I just wonder, in terms of the investment, now you just mentioned the code is on GitHub, are you freely available? how would you judge how much investment would we as an organization have to make in terms of manpower behind this, or hours to set something like this up and test it with our students? Should we go via your route, i.e. we use you as the provider and that provides data to you, or should we try and install this on our own at our organizations to maybe play with it a little bit and see how it goes down with our clients, with our students? What would you suggest?
Regarding the second system, this question answering system, to my understanding, there are already existing like commercial systems like that. And that could be like a quick way to get there. Of course, you can download our code and build around that. If you have a bunch of smart students who can do a bit of programming, it is a couple of weeks and you have something that is functional. So kind of major workload has been already there. So we have built the system, and basically especially this smart unit, which is checking that is this actually answer to the question, and does it contain hallucinations? So these kind of basic elements that we need for the quality control, they took the most time of our students, and they are there in the system, and I believe they are applicable in other use cases as well. For the first one, for the conversational assessment, so we have like a prototype for that, and that requires a bit of work as well to be able to really fully deploy that. And of course, it requires kind of a platform where to use that. So we used Telegram. We now have Discord-based bot also for that. So, but you need to think that what is your platform, and then you may need to integrate that to the platform to be able to use it. And of course, you need that agent running somewhere. You need that system back end, so to speak.
That sounds like there are a few student projects coming along on this already. Just see whether our students can install or test a system like that and cater that to what we need in terms of asking our specific students on various courses. So thanks very much for that. I think we can now go over to my favorite butterfly researcher in Bremen, Matthew. Do you want to ask a question?
Yes, I do. Thank you. So also working with butterflies. I have a question that's for both of you, but maybe a little bit more for Jennifer. I also work with butterflies. I've done computer vision stuff. I will probably send you an email at some point in the future with other broader, more specific questions. But the big question I have in this context, from my knowledge of machine learning, and I haven't applied it UF myself, but people I've known doing it, is that it is in many ways a black box. And especially, and that's my concern for almost all applications of this, but especially for scientific applications where we want to understand what's actually going on in the world. And if we can't understand what our models are doing, how do we deal with that? How do we deal with the black box? Are there ways to gain an understanding of what's going on inside the black box that might actually help us improve our scientific understanding of the situation, or our ability to understand what kind of output these systems will give us?
So Jenner, you want to go first? So definitely we have a black box model as well in our system. And we try to make it, if it's a language model, we can ask it to explain itself, why it gives certain kind of advice for the student, for example. And it can give like explanation for that. But internally, what this model is doing is, of course, not so clear. And we have teams of students working on trying to understand what these models actually do and how we can make it more transparent and visible. What are the decisions that they're making? So maybe over to Jennifer.
Thank you. So this is an area of great interest in computer science, so things like interpretable AI, and I think we'll keep seeing, probably it's very fast moving as well, we'll see more and more coming out in this area, which I think will probably be of interest to us as biologists and other scientists dealing with very complicated things. A few suggestions based on kind of what we can do with the things we have at the moment. So thinking about the convolutional neural network. So the operations that are involved are not mysterious. They are well defined and they're quite simple. So because these networks have a very large number of nodes in them, maybe people in the audience will have seen these sort of diagrams giving us an idea of what's in these neural networks, and there are a lot of little dots. So inside all of these dots, there are quite simple operations happening. They might be essentially things like multiplication, addition. I think things like regression terms. These kind of things are simple, and the idea is the simpler they are, the better, because they have to happen many, many times. So people have designed algorithms to use many simple operations. So why is it that it's so hard to understand what's happening? I think I essentially see it's because of the scale. So it's because these things are happening so many times that we lose that. When I want to understand something in maths, I do it on paper. When I really want to think, I've got it in my brain. So I can do that with, say, a neural network with maybe 3 nodes in it. I can do that, and I'm like, oh, okay, I understand what's happening. But that 3-node network ain't going to get me very far in my field. So then we have these huge networks. So what do we do? So there are still some things that we can do to think, well, what happened when we made this really big? So we can, for example, visualize aspects of the network. So we can take things like the weightings that different nodes in the network had and try to visualize those. If we're doing convolutional neural networks and we have these little, I showed a slide with these little filters where we're trying to find kind of squares that match in the image, we can look at what filters were found and see what they look like. And then we can get an idea of, oh, okay, maybe this is detecting kind of straight lines or spots or something like that. You can look at kernels from different stages in the process of the network. So how was this built up? And there are visualizations online you might have seen with kind of getting at this idea, well, maybe we can see that is by starting with recognizing kind of corners and edges, you can get an idea of features of the face and learn what eyes are and things like that. Again, we're kind of doing visualizations that have made quite simple representations of something that's still too big for us to understand. We can do things like data visualization. So that's what we've done a lot of. So we take our embedding and then we try to validate it. So we look at how it relates to genetic information, and we visualize different classes of the data. So we color plot these visualizations by different things that might be of interest. And we say, oh, okay, look, you can see that it's been split on this axis by this category of interest. So for example, we found in a study published this year that you can look at both sexual variations, so between males and females in butterflies, and between species at the same time, and that these might be separated in different ways in your embedding, say on different axes of this multidimensional space. You can also plot the raw images. So I showed some examples of that as well. And then you can get a human readable visual idea of what's lying along an axis. So if you see that things are getting much bluer as you go along this axis, then in the embedding, you can think, oh, okay, maybe this has got something to do with being blue or not. So there are a lot of different ways that we can use to kind of interpret and interrogate what's happening inside this really big box.
Okay, great. Thanks very much. It's 1 o'clock already. Time flies when you're having fun. I don't want to stifle any further discussion, so it's just a last shout out really for whether there's anything that you would like to raise or comment on. There's nothing in the chat yet. Jennifer, you want to?
Me too.
I'd just like to say, please do, anyone who had any interest in anything, would like to tell me about things that I might be interested in, and please do feel very free to send me an email. I'll pop my email in the chat now, but it's fairly easy to find me just by Googling as well. You should find my University of Essex webpage. Thank you.
Oh, that's great. That's great. And as I said, eventually the recording of this webinar will make itself onto the BioYUFE channel, so there are the emails recorded there as well, just in case you wanted to go back to that. Over to Aki.
Oh yeah, I just wanted to talk to Jennifer. I sent you general email. I'm also in this insect research, and I actually wanted to ask a simple question about, can you recognize individual butterflies?
In theory, that should be possible, because the triplet training method that we used was one of the first implementations of that was Google FaceNet, and that was developed in order to recognize individuals from many profile pictures, so scraped from publicly accessible social media profiles. And so and there's no reason why, the human, I don't see why, the human face is any more or less variable than, the other biological individuals potentially. So, but the thing that is ideal for that is a large amount of data. So the more images you can get of an individual in different poses, doing different things, and other individuals doing different things, then the better your chances are. And it probably does depend on it. So butterflies are amazing visual signaling insects. So our job is quite easy with them. I might be sort of prejudiced against some other ones, but if you work on Drosophila, if you're interested in that, is there the same amount of variability in the visual phenotype? I don't know, but I think in principle, yes, and that would be really interesting to test.
Okay, that's really cool. Yeah, I'll drop you an email.
Great, thanks very much. New connections made already in this neural network here that we're dealing with as part of this webinar. Lovely. Well, it just leaves me, Ute, I guess, to just close the session. Is that all right with you? Is there anything else that you wanted to bring forward?
Well, that was a brilliant kickoff for the webinar series. Now, I would say I have a number of questions, but it is already too late. So, I mean, I think we have to close to keep the hour, which we promised. And yeah, I can only thank you very much for giving this great input today, this great speeches, very, very interesting. And thank you very much.
Yeah, no, lovely. Thanks very much again from me as well to all the participants today. They are the next BioYUFE webinars, should be on your screen now. 28th of March, neglected biodiversity. 8th of April on military ecology, and 3rd of June on green exercise and mental health. So please take note of those dates. If I remember, I will send these dates around to you via an email shortly afterwards. So just look out for that and put it into your diary if you don't mind. So thanks again for participating. Good seeing you all, the ones that I saw on the screen, and I hope to see you soon in one of the next webinars. Cheers and bye-bye.